Once again, Toronto FC swung big this offseason, revamping their back line. Headlined by bringing in marquee MLS free agents Sean Johnson and Matt Hedges, as well as a familiar face in the midfield, Victor Vasquez. Couple that with a full preseason for Italian superstars Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi, and expectations are raised north of the border as the 2023 MLS season kicks off in just a few days. To help me preview what should be an exciting season for the Reds, I couldn't think of a better guest to bring on, a man who needs little introduction, MLS and US Men's National Team Insider for MLSsoccer.com, Tom Bogert. Tom, I feel like this Michael Singh, Tom Bogert collaboration, it's been brewing for quite some time. Happy to have you on, man.
Jesus. Yeah, I'm sorry. The good time for me there. Yeah, no, it was a great start. But yeah, no, I'm upset. I feel like I should have been on earlier. I love the work. I love the stuff you do. So, I've been in the background. I don't know if that was the first time you were on ETR. I was also on the show. I wasn't interviewing you, but does that count? I was just sitting there while you went, so I don't know.
We'll count it, but this is the first official time, and happy to do this right before an exciting season, not just for Toronto FC, but also Major League Soccer as a whole. We will get to Toronto FC very shortly. I promise fans who are watching this for that. But first, I just wanted to touch on sort of what you were doing this offseason, which seemed like you were breaking transfers for fun, left, right, and center every day during vacation, during the World Cup. Come on. So that was exciting. But I got to ask you about sort of this offseason. We didn't see the Lorenzo Insignes. We didn't see the Xherdan Shaqiris. We didn't see the Hector Herreras that we saw last offseason. It seems like there was not really that big name that stood out, but I'm sure there still was some pretty big transfers. So just from your perspective, for the fans who are wondering, what's the one name that you can kind of single out of all the transfers that happened that you would say was the biggest and fans should be paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think that there's like a top grouping, and you could argue any one of these 4 or 5 guys, and I've kind of gone back and forth of the one. You could talk about Georgios Giamacas sitting in Atlanta. You could talk Martin Ojeda in Orlando. You can talk Dante Vanzier with the New York Red Bulls. But the one that I'm going with is Evander with the Portland Timbers. His club record signing. Guy's a 24-year-old. He was leading the Europa League in assists when they broke after the group stage. So that's not a small sample size. He's somebody who was doing it for numerous years with Michelin in Denmark. This is a guy who always just transfers to a German or an Italian or a French or an English club. Like, this is a player at this stage of his career that had come to MLS before this. This is a player who has aspirations to maybe go back to Europe at a higher level. Again, you either stay at Michelin or you just go directly there in the past. So the fact that the Portland Timbers are getting Evander while leading the Europa League in assists and coming here in his prime, entering his prime at 24 years old, I think that's the biggest signing of the offseason. And with that, the expectations are really high for him to come in and impress. Like, he was getting a lot of goal contributions in Denmark, and they were playing him as a number 8 sometimes. Like, he's 10 with the Timbers. But one of the things that they like so much about the deal is they're not, even if he was one of those like heliocentric, Emmanuel Reynoso guys, doesn't do a whole lot of work defensively, that would have been fine because he's going to, create enough chances to make it worth it. But they're like, if we needed to, we could play him as a number 8 because he still has that kind of drive, that defensive hunger, that ability that he showed with Michelin. Maybe it won't be the same because he will be the star man in Portland. But one, I guess, bonus point is that he's really like a modern number 10 rather than, say, a throwback that stands in the center circle like Valderrama and is, some of my favorite players of all time. But, Evander's more like a modern number 10.
Yeah, I get really big Richie Puig vibes there, just hearing you break it down there at that age, coming over at this time. But let's shift things over to what was honestly a really busy offseason for Toronto FC. They made some pretty marquee signings. Tom, just your thoughts overall on TFC's offseason, the work that they did to sort of revamp their back line and bring in a couple of established veterans.
Yeah, they went out and signed 2 of the top 3 or top 4, 2 of the top 5 free agents on the market. Thought that was really good. Matt Hedges, I'll start there. Their worry, if we're going to go to the negative, is how this contract will age. Pushback there is, while he might not be elite in 2 years, is that I think maybe some of the injury stuff is a little bit overblown. There's always a worry with a 32-year-old center back and somebody with the miles on him. But last year he had 26 starts, I believe. I was doing the numbers or writing this the other day. Like 10 out of the last 11 years, he started 75% of Dallas's games in any given season. There's one season. Like, this isn't somebody who is constantly battling injuries. Like, yeah, he's getting up there in age. And in year one, I think that it's pretty obvious that he's going to be a very good center back. Like, I understand why Dallas declined his purchase option at around $1 million, but you could have done a whole lot worse than that. And I thought that they only would have declined that if they knew they could have re-signed him. So I thought that's a really good signing. And, if we'll worry about how that contract ages later, Sean Johnson's a safe bet, just about the safest bet on the free agent market, because his position, how he's going to age, what he's done in MLS prior to this point, and where he is like currently, like there are no questions about the sign. They went out and got the best goalkeeper realistically available within the league. And again, like this was a really, really important position for them to upgrade. Matt Hedges is probably slightly more important just because if he's really good, that's going to make a lot of players around him. It's going to make life a lot easier for them. But Sean Johnson, when all else fails, if he's elite again or above average, like that's going to be such a jump from what this goalkeeping group gave them last year.
Yeah, that's probably, I would say, from a free agent, new acquisition kind of standpoint, that's been their biggest acquisition. Obviously, they also bring in Sigurd Rosted and Raul Petretta, some really important acquisitions there on the back line. Now, the one concern, I have to put it out there, you kind of touched on it, but okay, TFC are signing proven veteran MLS talent, but is there any concern that with the expectations that comes with that, when they're signing people of that age, that they won't live up to those expectations, that maybe they're, I want to say, maybe over the hill at all?
Yeah, look, that's always a concern. And in free agency, you're not going to get a whole lot of great value deals, right? Because they weren't the only team trying to sign Matt Hedges. They weren't the only team trying to sign Sean Johnson. You're not going to get many discounts because of an open market and a lot of teams kind of competing with each other to sign these players. And that's why Matt Hedges' deal went as long as it did. That's what they needed to do to get the deal done because there were other teams interested. So, yeah, it's definitely a concern, but it's less concerning than what the center back group was last year. It's less concerning than the goalkeeping group was last year. So, again, they were in a spot of need and in desperation in free agency. That's kind of when, years get longer and offers become, soccer is always a guaranteed sport. So it's a little different, but that's where the money becomes fully guaranteed or again, the extra years there or a player option, stuff like that. This is what happens when a player hits free agency, and they did what they had to do to get the deals done. And like, I'm not going to really kill him for that because that's good ambition. And again, like it could age poorly. It could work out, or the team could just be okay. And that won't be enough given, the age profile of the group. But this is what they needed to do, whether it works, to the absolute A+ degree or not.
Right. Now, I wonder if you could, think about their offseason as a whole. We mentioned there Petretta, Rosted, Matt Hedges, Sean Johnson. In the midfield, Victor Vasquez. They also acquired Brandon Servania. And then up top, Diamande comes in as their number 9. If you were to give TFC a letter grade this offseason, A, B, C, or D, based on those acquisitions, what would you throw out there?
Honestly, pretty high. And like, I don't want to, Brandon, I really love this acquisition. It was, they probably still need another center mid, if not 2, just for depth and rotation. And again, this is an older team, so you have to expect maybe injuries or maybe rotation, whatever it is. But that was one of the reasons. I know we're going to talk about air quote my prediction later. That was one of the reasons why, like that lack of depth. Like last year when Mark Anthony Kaye got hurt, they were screwed. That was it. And like it's unrealistic to expect over an MLS season all of these players to start 30 games. So I don't want to, jump a letter grade because of a backup center mid, but like I cannot stress how important I thought that move was and how good of a fit I think it to be. So I probably, put it at somewhere B+ right now. And again, it's very fluid. If Matt Hedges looks like he lost a step, then that's going to be really bad. Again, I'm not worried at all about Sean Johnson. I'm not really worried about Hedges either. But again, for the collective of they had to go at least 1 left back, at least 2 center backs, at least a goalkeeper, at least a couple center mids, while keeping Jonathan Osorio. And again, some of these players that came back, being Sean Johnson as a real big coup, like I think that they did everything that they needed to do. Again, bar maybe another left back and maybe definitely another center mid. But they hit all of the most important pieces before match day one. And this team is ready to go for match day one. And you still have 2 more months to find a backup center mid, find a backup left back, do whatever else you need to do on top of those absolutely core crucial, shopping items.
Yeah, I think that's really important to mention, just thinking about where this team was a year ago heading into preseason and the start of the regular season as to where they are now, miles in a much better place. And you touched on Brandon Servania just quickly. Obviously, he's the new kid on the block. He's a guy that you probably know a lot better than most TFC fans watching this. Give us the quick 30-second, 1-minute scouting report on Brandon Servania and what TFC fans can expect out of him.
If you watch a 1-minute highlight video of him, and this rings true for a lot of players, but particularly for him, you're like, oh my God, how is this guy not starting 30 games for Dallas these past few years? Like, his passing range is awesome. He's really good. He's in range for a 30-yard shot. It's not the dumbest thing in the world when he kind of loads up and takes. So he has all these physical tools. When he's like kind of buzzing around in the midfield, he looks energetic. He looks all action. Oh man, if he puts this all together, like, he's going to be a problem. I'm surprised he didn't play more for Dallas, to be honest with you, particularly with Paxton Pomykal having so many injury issues over the years. He was passed by Edwin Cerrillo at defensive mid for Dallas, which, again, I was a little bit surprised of, but Cerrillo's been a good player. If Bob Bradley is able to get this total package out of Servania, it's going to be like a Mark Anthony K explosion. It's going to be, whoa, like, who's this guy? Except when Servania was coming up, he was a really top regarded prospect. He was a lot of we all knew of him before he was playing regular minutes with Dallas because of that academy and because of where his profile was. So again, if Bob Bradley and his coaching staff can get out of him anything that Bob was able to do with K and LAFC when he had his breakthrough, and Latif Blessing, insert any other of these success stories that Bob Bradley has with development, this is an absolute steal.
I have to agree. I've heard nothing but good things about him. And speaking of Matt Hedges yesterday, actually, when he was teammates with Servania, he had nothing but positive things to say about him and emphasized that there really was some untapped potential and didn't really know why he wasn't starting more games at Dallas. So I think the way that you phrase it, there's good reason for TFC fans to be excited. And you mentioned Mark Anthony K there in that mix. For me personally, Tom, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think he's going to be the guy that kind of has to be checking over his shoulder right now to see if maybe Brandon Servania could be the guy that maybe displaces him from the starting 11. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, if you had to pick any one of the 3 midfielders, I guess it'd be K. But I don't know. I'm still a huge Mark Anthony K guy. Like, I was arguing with, and he wasn't that great for Toronto. Like, I mean, people had said maybe he wasn't peak. Colorado traded him away, but like, my argument was for Colorado, when you get Mark Anthony K and you get Kellen Acosta, just re-sign them to new contracts. Like, that's the end game. I'm not sure why they were trading those players. So I still have a ton of Mark Anthony K stock. I know that I not the consensus 100% opinion, but again, in that midfield trio, Michael Bradley, I'm shocked if he's not starting when he's fit. Jonathan Osorio, everything that he is and the way that he can fit with Insigne and Bernadeschi and everybody else, it would have to be K. But again, you look at that midfield, like, there's going to be minutes and there's going to be rotation. The fact that you can play 8 or a 6, and my colleague Matt Doyle's ceiling is highest at a number 6, he's going to get a ton of minutes. And there's going to be, out of those 4 players, if everybody gets, maybe Servania gets the least of the amount, but if he ends up with, say, 20 starts and the other guys end up with 28 starts or whatever the math breaks down to, don't check me on it, then that's pretty solid. Then that means that will have been great. Again, if he's starting 17 to 20 games, if all of these positive things I'm saying about him ring true.
Yeah, you mentioned Michael Bradley there, and that's someone I want to touch on a little bit here. As a guy who's from New Jersey, obviously Michael Bradley, New Jersey native, what's your perception of Michael Bradley? Because from a lot of Toronto fans' perspective, it's very polarizing. Some people are like, oh man, this guy's over the hill. He can't do it anymore. He's too slow. But there's people, and I'll admit, I'm one of those people that see this guy he's aging kind of like fine wine, where you look at last season, he played all but 10 minutes, the second most minutes in Major League Soccer. Just from your perspective, what's Michael Bradley to you?
I don't understand why we're quick to move on, why we're so quick to find the next, why we're so quick to just disregard past performances. Like, okay, Michael Bradley isn't 28. He's not peak Michael Bradley.
Mhm.
So what? Like, are we holding it against him that he was, one of the best midfielders that the national team ever had? Like, I brought this up a couple years ago. Like when he gets booed by teams, I don't understand it. Like, he's one of the best midfielders the national team has ever had. He was crucial to World Cup success in 2010 and 2014. It's his fault that they didn't qualify for the 2018 World Cup. I know he's captain. He's gonna get the a lot of criticism. He's one of the biggest faces of the team and everything. But like, how quickly we turn on our own is just it's asinine to me. And so for Michael Bradley, the Toronto FC is not Toronto FC without Michael Bradley. Like, he's still a very useful player in this league. Like, yeah, he doesn't cover the same amount of ground. He's not as fast. He doesn't have that same step. So when you're building the roster, you have to have Mark-Anthony Kaye near him. You have to have, let's hope Brandon Servania has the same thing. His passing range is still elite in this league. I don't know. We don't need to disregard it because he's not high pressing like a box to box. Like, I don't know. I think that we're too quick to look at what players aren't rather than what players are. And what he is right now is still a very useful player in this league. I could listen to arguments that, okay, maybe he shouldn't start 34 games. Fair enough. I can hear that. But like, I think he's still a starting level player in this league. And particularly for how Toronto want to play with the ball, that's a great situation. Just make sure that there are legs around him in the midfield so he's not exposed. And again, the Mark-Anthony Kaye trade I thought was really good for that. Brandon Servania is kind of that mold. I do think that they need another player like that to have more options and more depth. And again, if Servania doesn't work out, whatever it is, to have more options for that. But I don't know our insistence on moving on from these players. And I know just because somebody's 21, let's give him a chance because maybe one day he turns into Michael Bradley. But guess what? You have Michael Bradley ready.
I love the passion, Tom. I think I hit a nerve there, but
you absolutely did.
You're bang on, though. I'm so happy that you could say it way more eloquently than I could. Before we wrap, we need to get this in because we need to clear the air here.
Because I've been so positive, you guys might think that I put Toronto at first. This is fair, so I'll
exactly. What's going on here? There's a disconnect. There's a clear disconnect right now. Okay, time to clear the air. Just you haven't seen it yet. The receipts are out there, so I'm just gonna bring it up. Tom Bogert, MLSsoccer.com, his preseason prediction. TFC fans, take this in. 13th in the Eastern Conference. Tom, what gives?
So for all these, the best case scenario for Toronto is really good. It's Bernadeschi. It's Kaye and Osorio are fit. It's Bradley looking, not old. And it's Hedges fitting in from day one and being great. Johnson, all that. The scenario in which they're bad is if Hedges has lost a step, Bradley has lost a step, any one of these, Osorio or one of them has a injury where they're out for a decent amount of time, and neither one of those guys have been, the pillar of omnipresence in the midfield. If Insigne isn't one of the best players in the league, if Diomande or Ayo Akinola aren't the answers up top, and again, there are so many question marks. And I think if two of those question marks into real questions and real problems, this can go off the rails pretty quick. Maybe it's just too fresh in my mind last season. Mark-Anthony Kaye got hurt, and that was it. It was over. Like they were so easy to play through it at that point. That was one injury, and like we're in Major League Soccer, every team has injuries. Philly were lucky with injuries last year. That's about it. Like everybody has, and even they had Alejandro Bedoya go out before there are injuries, and like where the roster is because of mistakes of the past and what the front office and Pop Bradley had to do to try to put together every bit of asset they could to get Mark-Anthony Kaye here. Like there is not a lot of room for and I think that's my holdup with this team, that two injuries or maybe two of these question marks are actually the wrong answer. It can go off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the narrative going around about this team. I think you wrote in particular that this is the thinnest team in Major League Soccer.
Pre-Servania trade, to be fair. My God, that was like a oof. Like you need that
from these guys.
No, honestly, like that's honest to God, it does. Like because I think that he's a competent starter in this league, right. So that helps. But again, like that, that's not the difference between 12th and 3rd, right? But it's just one of these things where it doesn't feel like there's a contingency plan. Or what if one of Insigne or Bernadeschi either doesn't live up to it or misses some time? Who else is providing the goals in the attack? Like Diomande, I remember fondly his time at LAFC and a journeyman striker. Ayo Akinola, for all the talent that I think he has he started 3 games in a row in his entire career? Like these are all like real legitimate questions. And again, there's just, you can look at everywhere on the field and there's just too many of them for me to be like, oh, it's all going to be okay. They're going to be great. And every single thing is going to work out just exactly as expected.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? They're starting 11. To be honest, if I'm a fan, I'm watching this, I'm like, I'll take that starting 11 against almost every other team in the league. But in probably the most congested season in Major League Soccer, at least recent history, that's just not going to work. That's not going to add up. There is good reason for concern. But you mentioned who's going to be the other guy. And this is my last question for you before I let you go. Right now, it seems like Jonathan Osorio is going to be occupying that third DP spot for Toronto FC, at least until the summer, where it seems like that's when they want to go out and add a third piece. If you're putting on your coaching hat, your Bob Bradley hat right now, ideally, what position is that need? Like, where do you see TFC making that, you're utilizing that third DP spot?
First of all, I think the best way to build rosters in this league right now is for that to be a young DP, and then you can use the U22 initiative slots to, further supplement the roster. And particularly this team, they need as many competent bodies in the rotation as they can. And look, I understand you don't necessarily want to block the academy with, some more young players that you're spending money on and thus have to keep playing, so not to ruin the investment. But, with the wingers, I don't know if it makes sense for it to be a DP center forward. I could, again, I certainly wouldn't say no to it just because of the nature of this league. But for me, I would bring in a young DP somewhere in the midfield. Again, I know that complicates things with you have 3 defined starters, but I'd still bring in a young DP somewhere in the midfield. And then you use that those U22 slots at fullback, young center backs. That's always really difficult. So probably not there, but, probably U22 initiative left back, and then maybe another U22 initiative attacker. You have 3 more players to add to this rotation just because of, rather than say going for Belotti or whatever. And that would be so much fun. I wouldn't be complaining about that either, but I think the best way to build that roster, and particularly this team, given their constraints and where they are with their depth and, readiness of some of those academy players that, they tried a lot of them last year. A lot of them have moved on because they didn't pass the test for Bob Bradley. Because of where they are with the depth, I would go for, again, young DP and 2 U22 initiative players.
Yeah, that's something Bob Bradley has touched on. So it's going to actually be really interesting. One of the probably narratives to watch for this team is exactly how they round out the rest of this roster. But man,
and look, that it's not my money. It's easy for me to say just go spend $8 million on a 21-year-old and then $4 million on a couple 19 and 20-year-olds. Like, that's expensiple. And I understand
money. Come on.
Yeah, right. Like,
that's
so so yeah, like, I understand that's not always viable for every team. But, again, when the expectation is Insigne, Bernadeschi, all the other things that this team has traditionally done, like in this bracket, like the Atlanta, Toronto, Miami, Galaxy, LAFC, I think that they should always have 3 U22 initial players.
Yeah, that's probably the new way that MLS teams should start building. You're right. It is relatively new, but it's going to be interesting to see just exactly how teams decide to utilize that mechanism. But man, Tom, once again, super generous with your time. I know a lot of TFC fans are going to appreciate this. If you're not following him already, which, I mean, come on, if you're watching this, you're following him, but just in case, at Tom Bogert, he is MLS and United States men's national team insider for Major League Soccer. I also saw doing some work now for Bleacher Report, regular on Extra Time. This guy's getting out there doing everything right now. So make sure you give him a follow, show him some love. And Tom, man, thanks for doing this once again.
Michael, you're the man. Thank you so much. Always got time for you.
Cheers.